What did America's founding fathers think of China? Examining letters from the founders shows that they mentioned China many times, usually the kind you put on your table, but they talked a bit about the country too. Considering how far America is from China, how America did not immediately become a major world power after independence, and how America's territory didn't even reach the Pacific Ocean until the 1840s, you'd think that America would have little interest in China in the early years, but you'd be wrong. George Washington was an early proponent of trade with China. In 1784, just 1 year after the War for Independence ended, the first American voyage to China took place. Robert Morris, who is a largely forgotten founding father, but was the financier of the American Revolution, helped fund the voyage of the Empress of China. The Empress of China sailed from New York City to Canton, which we now call Guangzhou. The trip to China and back took 14 months. George Washington owned at least one book about China before the Revolution, which was Louis Lecomte's Travels Through China. He planted Chinese flowers at Mount Vernon. He nominated Samuel Shaw as U.S. Consul to Canton. Shaw had been on the Empress of China voyage and brought back porcelain that Washington had ordered. Then, towards the end of his presidency in 1796, he said that the border with the Cherokee should be delineated, but that nothing short of a Chinese wall or an army could stop settlers from encroaching on Cherokee land. The Great Wall of China was well known. George Washington was wise to promote trade with China. Before his presidency was over, American trade with China had already surpassed that of every Western nation except the UK. Washington remarked that a single vessel just arrived in this port pays $30,000 to government. 2 vessels fitted out for the fur trade to the northwest coast of America have succeeded well. The whole outfits of vessels and cargoes cost but $7,000. One is returning home loaded with India produce. The other is going back to the coast of America, and they have deposited $100,000 of their profits in China. Remember that all of this would be worth a lot more in today's money. John Adams continued the old China trade, and in his post-presidency, he showed interest in learning Chinese. He was also a fan of Confucius. Thomas Jefferson used Chinese railings on the top of Monticello. Before his presidency, he wrote that China is not dependent on Europe, and neither should America be. Like Adams, he showed some interest in the Chinese language. As I mentioned earlier, the round trip for the first American voyage to China took 14 months. That's because they went across the Atlantic Ocean, around the African coast, and through the Indian Ocean before reaching China. Thomas Jefferson was hoping that a shortcut could be found. In 1803, Napoleon sold a lot of land to the United States in what's called the Louisiana Purchase. The majority of this land had never really been controlled by the French, and neither the French nor the Americans had much knowledge of what was in the interior. Jefferson was hoping there'd be a navigable river that led all the way to the Pacific, and then trade with Asia would be easier. The Lewis and Clark expedition showed that there wasn't. So American ships would still need to take the long way to China. Thomas Jefferson was very enthusiastic about American trade with China. He used trade with China to help establish a distinct American identity and stressed the importance of making the Chinese understand that Americans and British were two distinct nations. James Madison had a portrait of Confucius at his home. Confucius is now carved into the United States Supreme Court building, but that was in 1935, long after everyone I'm talking about died. James Monroe was the last founding father president. There's not much to say about him with regards to China. Might as well mention Alexander Hamilton. He wrote a little bit about trade with China. Benjamin Franklin strikes me as the founding father who, if you met, would be most likely to be in a very Chinese time of his life. He referred to China as the wisest of nations. This guy would be like a weeb, but for China. He loved Confucius. He owned a newspaper, and in the Pennsylvania Gazette, he published chapters from the Morals of Confucius, which was a translation of different Confucian classics. He praised China's meritocracy. He liked that they conducted censuses and kept good records. Chinese heating technology helped inspire Ben Franklin to invent the Franklin stove, a type of fireplace. He also, on more than one occasion, suggested building a Chinese wall. Some people claim that Benjamin Franklin introduced soybeans to North America, but that's not true. He did send soybeans and other Chinese plants to North America, though. Charles Thomson is probably someone you haven't heard of. He was the co-designer of the Seal of the United States. I want to read this quote of his. "Could we be so fortunate as to introduce the industry of the Chinese, their arts of living and improvements in husbandry, as well as their native plants, America might in time become as populous as China, which is allowed to contain more inhabitants than any other country of the same extent in the world. The population of the United States in the 2020s is larger than the 18th century population of China. Maybe we'll get to 1.4 billion one day." Okay, probably not.